Welcome along to part 2 of our video tutorial series where we're learning to create our first responsive web page. In the first video we got the HTML section done, which is just the basic structure of our page. So we've got all the information and pictures put in, but it looks pretty ugly. So we're going to add some style to it now by using a bit of CSS. So let's jump over to brackets and make ourselves a new document, and we'll save it before we go any further. Make sure it goes into your number 6 responsive design folder, and we're going to call it style.css. Click on save. Now to link the HTML and the CSS documents together, you need to go back to your index.html page. Up in the head section, just underneath the title there, open some pointy brackets and make another link tag. Write link rel equals style sheet, and then href equals and point to your style sheet down here, and then close off your pointy brackets. That line of code will now have linked your HTML and CSS documents. So any styling we add to the style sheet will now be applied to our HTML document. So the first thing I want to do is style up the body section, so the main bit that has all the writing and the pictures. This is one that I generally always start with, so I'm going to write into the style sheet. I'm going to write the body tag first of all and open up some curly brackets. I'm going to change the font size first of all to 1EM. I'm then going to change the font family to sans serif. I'll change the line height to 1.5 EM, and I'll set the margin to 0. Okay, you should be getting pretty familiar with those settings by now. I tend to do that in most of my web page tutorials. So let's go over and have a look here. This is how it currently looks. What we're going to do is change the font and get rid of this little white gap down the left hand side of the page. So I'll just refresh it, and you can see the changes that have taken place. So it's starting to look a little bit better already, just with that slight little change. Next thing we're going to do is style up the header. Remember, this is the header at the top. We've got the main heading and a little subheading under it. Okay, now to do this I'm going to get a little bit fancy. I'm just going to go over to my web browser here and show you two things. First of all, there's this font over here. Actually, I might just clear it so I can show you from scratch. There's this font over here that I found on Google Fonts called Audio Wide. It's a freebie, and I want to use that in my header at the top of the page. So what I'm going to do is simply go down and select this font. So select regular 400. It appears up the top here. See a little red circle. If you click on it, it gives you the code you need to include that in your web page. So what I'm going to do is click on this little copy button here, and I'm going to add that to my style sheet in the header section. So we'll go .header, so we're accessing that header class, which is this one just here, this little div section where we gave the name header. And inside of there we just paste in that code we just copied from the Google Fonts website. So the font family for our header is going to be Audio Wide. And for some reason, if for some reason our users can't load this font, then it will just resort to the cursive font, which is just a basic fancy little font. Doesn't look that flash. Audio Wide looks a bit better, but that should work on most people's computers. Okay, so our header should have that text. Now, before it actually works, we need to copy a little bit more code. Back over here on the Google Fonts page, you'll see this section here with a whole heap of different code. You don't need to copy all of it, just the last little paragraph there. The link href equals, and then it goes down to style sheet there. Press Ctrl+C to copy that little section, and that needs to go into your HTML document, back up the top here underneath your favicon. Alright, so that there will allow you to use a Google font in your web page, and it's going to be the Audio Wide font. So if we save that now and preview it, where is it? Not that one, this one. Let's see if this font changes. There we go, so that's changed to the Audio Wide font on Google Fonts here. I'll provide a link to that font in the video description below if you're watching on YouTube. So I'm going to close that off. The other thing I want to do is I want to put a bit of a gradient background in this header section. So I've got this website here called cssgradient.io, and you can play around here and make your own gradients. All you need to do is click on these little basically levers, and you can choose any old color, as you can see here, and you get a bit of a preview of what your gradient would look like. So I want mine to start with black at the top, At the 50% mark, which is halfway along this bar, I'm going to have this darkish maroon kind of color. Again, you could choose any old color to put in there. I'm trying to look for colors that match what I've already got. So all these car images here are very red and black oriented. So I'm going to go with those colors. And then over on this right hand side, I don't want to go bright red because I think it looks a bit ugly. So I'm just going to go a slightly darker red again around there. Okay, now that's a cool looking gradient background. To put that into your web page, you need to scroll down a little bit and just copy this second line of code. You don't need the first one, you just need this second one. Press Ctrl C to copy it. Go over to your CSS document, your style sheet, and under the header section, paste that in. I'm going to save that, go and preview it. Probably won't look too flush just yet, but you can see it's starting to come in. With a little bit more code, that'll look really good. So the other things I want to add to this, we're going to change the color of the font to white so we can actually see it stand out on top of that background. We need to contrast a bit better. I'm going to change the font size to about 30 pixels, so it's a bit bigger. I'm going to change the alignment of that text to be in the center of the page rather than on the left. And I'm going to put some padding around the outside of that header section so that we don't have that ugly white space at the top. So if we put in, say, 40 pixels padding, that should fix that problem. Okay, so those little settings there should make our header look pretty sweet. So let's refresh that. There we go. We've got a nice looking header for our web page. That looks sweet. So as we scroll down now, we can see a lot of this web page is done already. But we've still got a bit more styling to go. So let's keep going with it. Back over to our style sheet here. Next thing I want to do is just put a little bit of space, I suppose, like a bit of padding around this center section here. It's a little bit cluttered, I think, towards the left-hand side of the page. So what I'm going to do is style up the main section. So you can see here we've got the div class called main. That's all the pictures and the information. So let's write .main, and we're just going to put in, say, 20 pixels of padding. Okay, and that ought to fix our issue down the left-hand side here, so it's not hugging the edge of the page. Now when it does put the 20 pixels of padding in, it also puts it along the top and the bottom. Okay, down the bottom, not so much of an issue, but at the top, I feel like this white space is just a little bit too much. So what I can do is put in two numbers here. The first number I'm going to put as 5 pixels. So it only puts in a little bit of padding, and that's above and below that main section. 20 pixels I'm going to keep for the left and right hand sides of that main section. So if I refresh that now, you should see this text move up a bit closer to the header. Oops, I should save it first. There we go. So that just moved ever so slightly up, and I think that looks a little bit better now. That white space was probably just a bit too big for my liking. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start some of the responsive design here. I'm going to work with the images first of all. So I'm going to put in the img tag. So the image tag there. What I'm going to do is change the width of my images to be 100%. And there's a reason we're using a percentage here rather than, say, 400 pixels or something like that. With 100%, if I go and preview this, our picture now fills 100% of this main body section. Okay, even though there's a little bit of padding around it, that's okay, that's what we asked for. It fills 100% of the page. Same with these pictures down here. If I was to resize my browser now, okay, these pictures will always remain at 100% width of the page, no matter how big or small we go. As I go down here, you'll see the same happening with these pictures. And that's one way we can make our web pages have a bit of responsiveness. So whether we're on a mobile phone screen or a desktop computer, our pictures will always fill 100% of the page. Okay, so that is working well. The other thing I want to do is get these two pictures here side by side. Okay, I don't want them to be that big. It's just going to involve too much scrolling to get to the bottom of the web page. They're way too big. So let's make them a bit smaller. To do that, we're going to have to give each of these pictures down the bottom a unique name. So I'm just going to zoom back a bit here. Scrolling down in my HTML document, you'll see that we've got the two pictures right here next to each other. And to get them resized individually, I'm just going to zoom back a bit more. I'm going to have to get inside the first one here and give it a unique name. So I'm going to write ID equals, and I might start with small pic 1. Okay, it's going to be the small picture in my web page. For the second one here, I'm going to give it an ID name, so a unique name. That will be small pic 2. So I've got a small picture there for number 1 and number 2 pictures. Now I can go over to my style sheet and style them up individually. So instead of styling all the images, which I've done with this tag, just here, I'm going to style these pictures individually. So I'm going to put a hashtag and write small pic 1, open up some curly brackets, and I'm going to write display as inline to start with. So basically keeps it in a line there, like text would. And I'm going to set the width to 49% of the page. I'm going to do the same for the small pic 2. So I'm going to copy and paste that. And I'm going to say small pic 2 will be displayed as inline, and the width will be 49%. One other thing I'm going to do to this small pic 2 though is add in a line of code to move the picture to the right hand side of the page. Oops, I forgot the semicolons after those 49%. Okay, so in small pic 2, we're going to float it to the right hand side of the page. That means we're going to have small pic 1 on the left, small pic 2 on the right. Save that up, give it a test run. That looks heaps better. So these pictures are now 49% width of the page. That's why there's that little 2% gap there in the middle. And you can see that this one here is floating to the right hand side. Okay, so they're looking quite nice there next to each other. We want to style up the footer next, down the bottom here. So here's our footer, still looking a little bit ugly. So let's go back into our CSS here, and we'll put in .footer. So remember we called that bottom section here, this little class, footer. So if we just want to style up that little div, or that little division, let's put in .footer, and we're going to put in 20 pixels of padding first of all. We're going to change the font size to be a little bit smaller. Copyright statements are never too big, so we'll keep it at 0.75 EM, so it's only 3/4 of its usual size. We'll put the text into the middle of the page, so we'll align it in the center. I'm going to change the background color to black, and I'm going to put the text color to white. Okay, that's all we need to put on the footer. So a bit of padding, change the size to be a bit smaller, center it, and then change the background color as well as the text color. Save him up and just watch that footer at the bottom as I refresh this start to look a bit nicer. Alright, so that is all the styling done for our desktop view. That looks really good. I am happy with that. In the next video, in the final video, I'm going to come back and show you how to make this page responsive. Okay, so when we bring it down to tablet size or mobile phone screen size, we still want it to look good. So that's what I'm going to show you in the third and final video. So I'll see you in a moment.